On this Friday night, tragedy strikes Banff National Park. A rock slide kills 2 people on a popular hiking path as witnesses watch helplessly. The warning to other hikers in the region. Israel's Iron Dome is showing cracks. More missile strikes and civilians killed in the Middle East. What Iran is now saying about a possible path to peace. Canadian pride. Opinion polls show sagging support for LGBTQ2+ rights around the world. How Canada is bucking the trend. Plus, the Canada Strong Pass.
I'm kind of staying away from the States.
A new incentive encouraging summer tourists to staycation.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The body of a second person has now been recovered at the site of yesterday's rock slide in Banff National Park. 13 others were injured and police do not believe that anyone else is missing. That huge rock face gave way as hikers scrambled for cover. The slide happened at Bow Glacier Falls. That's about an hour's drive from Banff, Alberta. The route is popular among hikers young and old. The path begins just off the highway and it takes about 4 hours to complete. Our Jayme Doll is near the trailhead. Jayme.
Well, this place is on postcards and bucket lists. Not only does it have an emerald green lake, but also a glacier and cascading waterfalls. And the route is accessible for hikers of all abilities. It's no surprise why so many people come here. But sadly, this iconic spot will now be known for something other than its striking beauty. With no warning, a gorgeous sunny day on the mountain turned dark in a cloud of dust and rock.
It was half an amphitheater that appeared to come down in 2 sections. And then as I'm watching it, I realized there were people. And that's when I threw the phone in my backpack and ran. Experienced
hiker Kamala Dixon watched in horror as the mountain gave way.
There was a lady that was passing in and out of consciousness. We kept trying to keep her warm. People had described that there were people under the rocks. The rocks were huge that came down.
A ground and air response was dispatched. Rescuers recovered 2 bodies, one just hours after the slide, the other at dawn on Friday. The first victim has been identified as 70-year-old Jutta Hinrichs from Calgary. Friends say she loved to hike and loved these peaks. 2 weeks ago, the Alpine Club of Canada released a safety bulletin about rock slides in the Canadian Rockies after an event in Bugaboo Provincial Park in BC. Experts say rapid glacier melt is quickly shifting the stability of the landscape.
One of the problems mountain ranges are facing everywhere is the loss of mountain permafrost, and it's causing mountains to fall apart faster.
This is an image of Bow Glacier Falls in the summer of 2021, and here it is after Wednesday's slide. A massive crown now scarring his face.
We're always aware of rockfall. It's one of the biggest risks in the summertime environment in the Rockies.
Most emergency crews have now left this area and the parking lot has reopened. Banff National Park is expected to get a substantial amount of rain this weekend. This tragedy, a stark reminder of the unpredictability of the mountains. Jeff?
Thanks, Jayme. Turning to the Middle East now, and another deadly day of missile attacks between Israel and Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump, who says he will decide within 2 weeks whether to join Israel in attacking Iran, said today that he hopes people can come to their senses. And the president also criticized his own intelligence community over Iran's nuclear plans.
It looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Trump's rebuke signals growing tension over the high-stakes conflict. Mike Armstrong begins our coverage in Jerusalem. Mike.
Well, Jeff, a couple of things seem to have changed here today. First, there were more missile alerts during the day than at night. That's unusual. And second, more missiles appear to be making it through Israel's Iron Dome. The southern city of Beersheba was hit again Friday morning just after 6 a.m. and just a day after its local hospital was hit. A missile landed in a parking lot, causing serious damage to apartment buildings, but only injuring 7 people.
The third floor.
Panina El Albernet was in her apartment with her family when the sirens went off and was able to get everyone into their safe room.
It was very big explosion, and after the boom, we hear all the noises of something that failed.
Breaking glass, things falling.
Yes, things falling.
Multiple missiles were intercepted by Israel's defenses Thursday afternoon. This was the sky over Haifa, this is Jerusalem, and this is Tel Aviv. But again, one made it through, a missile hitting a government building in the north.
We evacuated 2 seriously wounded casualties, 2 moderate casualties, and 18 minor wounded casualties.
There are reports the efficiency of Israel's defenses is dropping. Whereas a few days ago, about 90% of missiles were being stopped, that rate may now be lower than 70%. The IDF says Friday's barrages from Iran were intended to be bigger, but Israeli jets were able to destroy 3 launchers before they could fire. Now, despite the danger, some Israelis who had been stranded outside the country are coming home. A cruise ship arrived carrying 1,500 people. The country's airspace remains closed to commercial traffic. There are emergency flights bringing more Israelis home. But Tel Aviv's international airport has been a target for missiles. We went by this afternoon and were forced to take shelter, while air defenses did intercept a missile. Israel's transportation minister is preparing to allow some special flights out of the country for foreign tourists and diplomats starting Monday. But as we saw this afternoon, that is not a decision to be taken lightly. Jeff?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Jerusalem. Thanks, Mike. Iran's foreign minister says his country is ready for diplomacy, but only if Israel stops its attacks. European foreign ministers met today in Geneva as the international community tries to avert any further escalations in this week-long conflict. The talks didn't produce any breakthrough, but as Vincent McAviney reports, diplomats are pushing to renew negotiations.
On the streets of Tehran, thousands marched to protest after a week of direct conflict with Israel. Holding pictures of some of their leaders and scientists killed, they chanted anti-Israeli slogans and burnt flags. As the 2 countries' militaries continued to exchange artillery fire, Iran's diplomats arrived in Switzerland for their first meeting with Western counterparts since the strikes began. They're urging Iran to return to the negotiating table, given US President Donald Trump's delay in potentially joining Israel's attack on Iran's nuclear sites. But that country's foreign minister was unequivocal. As long as the aggression and attacks continue, there is simply no room for talk of dialogue or diplomacy. We are in a legitimate state of self-defense. Iran is reportedly being told its nuclear enrichment must end completely, a demand it has always rejected, insisting it violates its rights to a peaceful nuclear program. But Israel's UN representative in Geneva was insistent.
We expect the European foreign ministers to take a firm stance vis-à-vis Iran and demand that there is a complete rollback of the nuclear program.
After the meeting, the European delegation was cautiously optimistic.
We are keen to continue ongoing discussions and negotiations with Iran, and we urge Iran to continue their talks with the United States. This is a perilous moment.
Friday in Lebanon, Iraq and Yemen, protesters voiced their support for Iran. But Tehran finds itself in a vulnerable position, with its proxies Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis severely depleted by Israel and its air defences weakening. These talks could be the last chance for a negotiated exit. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Today, a coalition of leaders representing various sectors, from health to human rights, demanded the Canadian government declare Israel's war in Gaza a genocide.
Israel's genocide in Gaza must stop. The Canadian government must call it genocide, comply with international law, and demand rapid and unhindered humanitarian access. It's genocide. Name it. Stop it. Sanction it.
The coalition wants the government to demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire and allow full access for aid. Bill C-5, also known as the One Canadian Economy Act, passed in the House of Commons today. The Prime Minister says it represents the core of the Liberal government's plan to respond to those U.S. tariffs by knocking down some federal trade barriers and giving Cabinet sweeping powers to approve major projects.
It is our contribution to a much broader effort with all the provinces, all the territories, to eliminate the barriers that have held our country back for far too long. Barriers that cost Canadians as much as $200 billion in lost opportunities every year.
But the bill has also faced criticism. Mackenzie Gray joins us now from Ottawa. Mac.
Mark Carney's got his first major legislative victory, but he did so, Jeff, by ramming through a new framework to fast-track major infrastructure projects through the House of Commons, giving it only a week to be studied, which has received substantial criticism, but it's a move he defended as a key to dealing with the threat from U.S. President Donald Trump.
This is what makes us different from the United States. This is what will make us more independent from the United States.
The bill allows Cabinet to designate things like ports, pipelines, and railways as national projects of interest, and to help get those projects approved, the bill grants the federal cabinet extraordinary powers to exempt a project from many federal laws, including key environmental measures, a section dubbed the Henry VIII Clause.
They're giving themselves significant powers to make significant decisions about major projects without the full degree of normal checks and balances.
Ms. Thompson.
The bill also requires consultation and in some cases written consent from provinces to have a project deemed to be in the national interest, and that could cause issues with any potential oil pipelines that go through Quebec or BC. But those same clauses are not included for Indigenous groups whose land a project may go through, which they've warned could lead to lawsuits or protests. But Indigenous Liberal caucus members promise meaningful consultations.
This is what Indigenous peoples want, and this is what Indigenous people, most importantly, deserve.
The Liberals passed the bill with Conservative support after they made multiple amendments to curb Cabinet's unilateral authority. But one Liberal voted against it, Toronto MP Nate Erskine-Smith. He said the Liberals would be screaming if a Conservative government gave themselves such sweeping powers, but Carney said he would not use similar powers in future bills.
This is unique balancing for what exactly the bill is seeking to achieve.
The bill will now move to the Senate, Jeff, where it's expected to be voted on next week.
All right, thanks, Mac. An explosive show in Hawaii coming up. The volcano lighting up the sky. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano is erupting in spectacular fashion, shooting 300 meters into the air. That lava flow is contained to the crater and doesn't pose a threat. It's Kilauea's 26th eruption since December. Canadian support for LGBTQ2+ rights rose over this past year. That's according to new polling by Ipsos. Canada is bucking the global trend. In most other countries polled, Ipsos found growing evidence of a so-called woke-lash, or a backlash against DEI policies. Kyle Benning reports.
Pride Month events take place in communities from coast to coast to coast in Canada. A new polling by Ipsos shows support for the community is among the strongest globally. Some say that support should be viewed as a signal to organizations in Canada and how they can conduct business, with the polling showing at least 3/4 of the population view marriage, adoption, and legal protections as equal.
Any employers looking to attract younger people, because the support is higher amongst younger people, they should be thinking about how, they are an attractive workplace towards diverse groups.
Support for the LGBTQ+ community saw a dip in 2024 across the board. But 2025 has seen a bounce back along a number of issues. While there is broad support for lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, there is far less for the transgender community.
Anti-trans attitudes just reflects this larger issue we have around rigid gender norms and how we haven't really been exploring on a population level. How can we rethink these gender norms?
While Canada in general has seen more support for the LGBTQ2+ community, there are gender divides on how much support is shown. And those divides are most pronounced for men and women under 35 years old.
Last year was the first time we recorded a sort of a early warning sign in terms of, voclash.
For example, more than 80% of women in this age bracket think same-sex couples should have the same rights to adopt children as heterosexual couples, while only 6 in 10 men in the same age group think so. And nearly 7 in 10 women would show support of openly lesbian, gay, and bisexual athletes in team sports, while only 40% of men would do the same.
That is really targeted towards these young men, that really kind of espouses a lot of these ideas that are really, masculinity is this.
The report found that 12% of Canada's population identifies as LGBTQ+. Kyle Benning, Global News, Toronto.
High-stakes gamble. Up next, how close is Iran to making a nuclear bomb? Returning to the conflict in the Middle East now, where Israel continues to take aim at Iran's nuclear sites. Iran claims it's enriching uranium for civilian purposes, but experts say uranium enriched to 60% far exceeds the levels needed for any nuclear power plant, and suggests instead that Tehran is moving closer to obtaining a bomb. Eric Sorensen looks into Iran's nuclear ambitions and why Israel is striking now.
Iran's leaders have long denied they were developing nuclear weapons. Why then build a secretive nuclear program deep inside this mountain and not comply fully with international inspectors?
An insurance policy, i.e., having people think that it could have a nuclear weapon.
An insurance policy against what happened to other dictatorships under Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi.
It looks around and sees countries like Iraq or Libya or even Ukraine that have renounced their nuclear programs as having been made vulnerable.
There is no evidence Iran has ever weaponized its nukes, but it is enriching uranium at higher levels. About 90% is the threshold needed.
The recent IAEA report noted a rather large increase in not only the total stockpile, but the amount of 60% enriched uranium. Due to the way uranium hexafluoride and enrichment works, it actually is pretty easy to go from 60 to 90.
And that has preoccupied Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. 13 years ago, he told the UN Iran would be close by the following year.
From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
Now, 13 years later, he told Fox News almost the same thing.
They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months and certainly less than a year.
So the threat to Israel is not new. But Iran is weaker now from Israeli bombs and its loss of allies, the Assad regime in Syria, and its depleted proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah.
Israel was able so far to destroy the Iranian ring of fire around it, this ring of proxies.
And Netanyahu has one more opportunistic reason to attack now. U.S. President Trump, who stood in the way until he didn't.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time.
I think if there was any other past president, you would not have had the green light or the orange light, and there would have been probably more reluctance on the part of Israel to move than they did.
The question now, will Trump go all in and send the U.S. military to join Israel at war with Iran? Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Some of Canada's top destinations are now free of charge. Up next, the new incentive for a summer staycation. That iconic soundtrack has been sending chills down spines for half a century. Steven Spielberg's Jaws inspired an enduring fascination and fear of sharks. To mark the movie's 50th anniversary today, tourists are flocking to this island where Jaws was filmed. They might need a bigger boat. Jaws returns to the movie theaters later this summer. This is the first day of summer, and if you haven't booked your vacation yet, Canadian destinations are reporting a spike in demand as many Canadians avoid the U.S. And starting today, there's a new incentive to travel domestically called the Canada Strong Pass. Heidi Petracek explains.
It's a sure sign of the season. Close to 5,000 cruise ship passengers on shore in Halifax, including a group of 80 from Chester, Pennsylvania.
I've been to Montreal, Quebec, and Niagara Falls, but first time in Nova Scotia.
This is my first time in Canada, period.
First time.
The tariff dispute between Canada and the United States not enough to ruin their holiday plans.
It's going to be what it's going to be. I try not to think about that part of it.
But enough to convince some Canadians to change theirs.
Yeah, I'm kind of staying away from the States at the moment.
A sentiment the federal government is tapping into, encouraging staycations with its new Canada Strong Pass, effective Friday.
The pass is Ottawa's way of taking advantage of the cross-border tourism tensions between the U.S. and Canada, offering Canadians incentives such as free admission to national parks and historic sites until September 2nd.
These will have an impact. The question is how large of an impact, but it will be a positive impact for sure.
Factor in our low dollar, and this tourism management professor believes Canadian tourism could come out on top this year.
At the same time, we're seeing others around the world, like Europeans, deciding they don't want to go to the U.S. as well, and that is playing to our advantage as well.
A new survey from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business suggests tourism operators are still nervous. Because while more Canadians may be talking about vacationing here, leaner times also mean they may spend less if they do.
Time will tell if that increased interest in staying in Canada, in vacationing within the province or in neighboring provinces will compensate.
Hopefully we can put all of our problems aside and patronize each other when it comes to tourism.
With that industry worth more than $120 billion to the national economy, there's a lot riding on those summer vacations. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada showcases this maple leaf ornament in Edmonton, a flag hanging from a hockey stick in Halifax, and a patriotic quilt in Cache Creek, BC. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.